This is the Focus JAM² SL. It's a lightweight e-bike that in many respects is the spiritual successor to the original JAM², which was way ahead of its time when it launched all the way back in 2016. Fast forward to 2024, and this modern version represents a pretty dramatic evolution with its chunky carbon frame, its nifty shape-shifting features, and the Fazua Ride 60 system. But how does it ride on the trail, and how does it compare to some of the other lightweight e-bikes we've tested? We'll be diving into all of that and more in this video review of the Focus JAM² SL. The Focus JAM² SL is a lightweight e-bike that's designed for all-round trail riding. It features a full carbon frame, 29-inch wheels, 160mm travel fork, and 150mm of travel out back. And that puts it into a similar space as the specialised Levo SL, the Trek Fuel EXE, the Orbea Rise, and the giant Trans X E+ Elite. Unlike those other bikes, however, the JAM² SL is built around the Fazua Ride 60 system, and this features a compact motor that delivers up to 60 Nm of torque and a 430 watt-hour battery. There is no charge port on the frame, which means you have to remove the battery for charging separately. This is a curious decision for a lightweight e-bike, most of which use a fixed battery which allows for a slimmer, fully enclosed down tube. In comparison, the JAM² SL has quite a chunky profile, though it does get a discrete user interface with the LED hub integrated into the top tube and the ring control remote up at the left-hand grip. There's also an app for tuning the motor's support levels and an optional 210 watt-hour range extender. Geometry is right up to date on the Focus JAM² SL, and it incorporates some nifty shape-shifting features, including adjustable headset cups. The bike comes from the factory with the headset cup set in the steep position, and that delivers a 65.5-degree head angle. Rotate those cups around and you can slacken out the head angle to 64.5 degrees. You'll also spot flip chips at the chainstay and seat stay pivots. These are designed to be used together to adjust the rear center length without affecting the rest of the geometry. Focus ships the small and medium frames set up in the short position, which gives you a 440mm rear center length. The large and extra large frames come in the long position, and that extends the rear center length to 447mm. There are 4 models in the Focus JAM² SL lineup, and prices start at $9,000. The bike that we've been testing sits one step down from the top. This is the Focus JAM² SL 9.9, and the current price on this is $12,500 Australian dollars. It comes with Fox suspension with a 36 grip 2 fork and a Float X piggyback shock. We've got a Shimano XT group set, DT Swiss HX 1700 wheels, and Schwalbe tyres with a soft compound Magic Mary on the front and a knobby Nick on the rear. Confirmed weight for our Focus JAM² SL test bike is 19.02 kilos with the tyres set up tubeless. Now, it isn't quite as light as some of its competitors, but it does come with a bigger and heavier battery. And it's worth pointing out that it's around 4 to 6 kilos lighter than the regular JAM², which provides a significant advantage when it comes to handling on the trail. Now, I will admit that it took me a few rides to warm up to the JAM² SL. The tyres were a little skittish to begin with as the factory release compound wore off, and the front end steering was a bit twitchy for my liking. I promptly rotated the headset cups around into the slack position, which provided better weight distribution and also improved stability on the descents. Furthermore, the rear suspension was a little doughy through the mid-stroke, and it was also susceptible to bottoming out on harder landings. I ended up changing from the stock 0.3 volume spacer up to a 0.6, which provided a significant improvement to suspension performance and made the whole bike feel more lively and responsive. With those changes, I've been really impressed with this bike's balanced handling and its sublime suspension. It's a great climber with a comfortable position that centers you nicely within its long wheelbase. You don't need a lot of input to stop the front wheel from wandering, and the short cranks provide plenty of ground clearance for negotiating tricky features. Along with the traction-rich suspension and the dual 29-inch wheels, and this bike loves technical climbing. It's also nicely planted on the descents, and you can push the front end quite hard thanks to the smooth and well-controlled fork. The Magic Mary is a thoroughly dependable tyre, and combined with the powerful brakes and the sturdy wheels, and you're not short of confidence when bombing down rowdier trails. The active suspension soaks up a lot, and it keeps the rear tyre glued to the ground even when things get loose and chunky. It's nicely smooth and active, but it's not so plush as to get bogged down and rob you of momentum. The Fazua motor is a compact and quiet performer, though it's not quite as stealthy as the class-leading TQ motor found on the Fuel EXE and the Scott Lumen. The upside is that the Fazua drive unit offers noticeably more power compared to the TQ and the Levo SL motors. There's more grunt at lower cadences, so you're less likely to be punished for being caught in the wrong gear on a surprise pinch climb. No, you don't get the same effortless pull as a full-powered motor set to boost or turbo, but if you mostly ride a full-powered e-bike in the eco or trail settings, you're likely to find the Fazua Ride 60 motor to be more than adequate. I've also been impressed with how smooth it is once you go past the motor's cutoff point. There's no perceptible drag, which was something that was quite obvious when I took the JAM² SL out for a ride without the battery. Now this dropped the total bike weight down to under 17 kilos, which is pretty close to many non-motorized enduro bikes. For those who will be using their e-bike for shuttle-based riding as well, the removable battery will be a welcome feature. For self-shuttling, that 430 watt-hour battery means you can get a decent amount of range. I mostly use the adaptive river mode, and I typically get 65 to 85 kilometers of riding in, with around 1500 to 1800 meters of elevation gain. To get some more accurate comparative data, I also subjected the JAM² SL to our standardized range test to see how many laps I could get in before the battery ran flat. I ended up with just shy of 1700 meters of elevation gain, which is more than any of the other lightweight e-bikes we've tested. On top of that, the average climbing speed was noticeably faster on this bike compared to the Levo SL and the Fuel EXE. As for downsides, well, there's really little to complain about in terms of the overall ride quality. I would have liked a shorter stem, but I didn't want to touch this guy with its cable-gobbling faceplate and the integrated headset, so I just left it as is. I wouldn't mind a slightly taller front end either. I do think the stock riding position suits this bike's intentions well, but on steeper descents, I occasionally found myself a little too low and forward. For this reason, taller riders may want to invest in a higher rise handlebar. I do think it's a shame that Focus didn't build in any mullet compatibility, especially given all the trouble it went to with those flip chips and the rotatable headset cups. While the JAM² SL is a really fun and intuitive e-bike to ride, it doesn't have quite the same level of playfulness or effortless cornering performance as the Levo SL or the Trans X E+ Elite. I also buzzed my ass on the rear tyre a few times, which will potentially be a bigger deal for shorter riders on the small frame. While I've been impressed with the overall power output of the Fazua motor, the delivery of that power isn't as smooth or as intuitive as the Levo SL motor. In the adaptive river mode, the assistance isn't always predictable. Sometimes when pushing hard, it felt like the motor was throttling its power output, resulting in a very slight pulsing sensation. Other times the motor would churn out more power than I was anticipating, even as I reduced pressure on the pedals. Now it isn't a huge deal, and I did get used to it after the first few rides. You can also use the breeze or rocket modes if you're chasing a more linear support characteristic, and you can use the Fazua app to tune the output of those modes to achieve your desired level of assistance. More of a concern was the fact that I had some cutout issues. On 3 separate occasions while I was cruising along, the motor stopped briefly before returning power a few seconds later. This was a bit strange since the LEDs remained on during that time. Now, of course, you don't need to be a detective to find reports online from people who have had issues with the Fazua Ride 60 system. We also recently had a problem with the Santa Cruz Heckler SL test bike with a critical motor failure within the first 14 kilometers of riding. Now, that bike has gone back, hopefully to be repaired and returned so we can complete the review, but obviously it was quite a concerning experience to have on an e-bike that costs over 17 grand. Now, thankfully, I've not encountered that kind of failure with the JAM² SL. It's also worth noting that Fazua is now up to its 9th firmware update for the Ride 60 system, with plenty of improvements that have been rolled out over the past year. There are some improvements I'd like to see elsewhere. The ring control remote works fine, but the plastic construction makes it feel quite flimsy. And while the LED hub is discrete, I prefer if it displayed the battery status in finer increments than the current 20% blocks. This forces you to pull out your phone to get an actual percentage of what's left. Speaking of the battery, having to remove it every time you need to recharge can get a bit annoying. For some folks, the removable battery will be a great feature, but I can't help but wonder how much lighter and sleeker this frame would be with a bolt-in battery and an enclosed down tube. The other downside of a removable battery is that you're increasing the chance for movement and vibration. While not nearly as bad as the Trek Rail or the Husqvarna Mountain Cross, there is a small amount of play with the battery on our test bike. Not helping things, the battery cover is quite thin and flimsy, resulting in a distinct lack of damping when rocks smash into it. Combined with the big hollow carbon frame, the finned brake pads and some cable rattle, and the JAM² SL isn't the quietest bike over rocky terrain. Those complaints aside, I've otherwise been thoroughly impressed with the well-considered build kit on the JAM² SL 9.9. This bike is decent value, and I'm happy to see that Focus didn't go overboard with weight-saving techniques like some other lightweight e-bikes have done. Here we have high-quality adjustable suspension, powerful brakes with proper-sized rotors, and tough alloy wheels with thicker rims and beefed-up hub internals. The Magic Mary is also a superb choice, and it's rarely put a foot wrong throughout testing. The knobby nick is dependable for everyday trail riding, and the fast-rolling rubber adds notable zip, and it helps to improve efficiency and maximise battery range. That said, it does struggle on loose and technical terrain, occasionally leaving the back end of the bike dancing to its own tune. Luckily, the front of the bike is so dependable that it's not always a disaster when the rear end skips out. But if this were my bike, I consider fitting a more aggressive rear tyre, something like a Hans Dampf or a Big Betty, and preferably with a beefier casing. Now, if you're curious to know how the JAM² SL compares to some of the other lightweight e-bikes we've tested, like the Levo SL, the Fuel EXE, the Rise, the Lumen, or the Transx E Plus Elite, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you've got. I'd also be keen to hear your thoughts on the JAM² SL, and perhaps there's another e-bike you'd like to see us review. Let us know your suggestions down below. And that brings us to the verdict on the Focus JAM² SL. And in the world of lightweight e-bikes, this is no doubt an attractive option. It's got a bigger battery and a more powerful motor than many of its competitors, so for those who have been on the fence between a lightweight or a full-powered e-bike, the JAM² SL may very well present the perfect compromise. It certainly delivers on the trail with a good amount of support and the ability to rack up a decent amount of range, albeit with a significant weight advantage over its full-powered peers. However, the Fazua Ride 60 system doesn't exactly have a spotless reputation, and there are other aspects of this bike that I've been less enamored by. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is a really well-balanced e-bike that climbs and descends bloody well thanks to its excellent suspension and handling. Indeed, if you're after a versatile all-rounder that's capable of a wide range of riding, the Focus JAM² SL should be on your list. Now, we'll point out that the full review of this bike is now live over at flowmountainbike.com. Just click the link in the video description below if you're keen to check it out. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys next time. Tooroo!